special live stream for the release of DxO Photolab 9, which is my favorite photo editor and my editor of choice. I use it probably 99% of all my images for processing. I think it delivers the very best result. And I wanted to demonstrate in a more concise way today than I did yesterday some of the features that are new to DxO Photolab, and also just talk about you know, uh, the overall performance of Photolab in general and my experience with it. It's been really good, and I've cherry picked a few images today, and I went out and I shot a little bit this morning. So I'm going to show you some brand new images as well to help demonstrate some of the features that I really like that are new in Photolab 9. And I do have my affiliate links down below where you can download like a 14-day free trial. But there's also a coupon code for 20% off, so that's a pretty substantial savings and it applies to all their products, not just Photolab 9. And that expires this week. So I'm going to try and do a live stream or make a video every day between now and Friday to really, push DxO Photolab 9 because I really believe in this product, and I want to support that as much as I can because I think it really improve your uh, post processing in general. And I'm sorry, my voice is a little bit hoarse today for some reason, but I see Henning's here and Kevin's here. Good to see you guys. Hopefully, some more of you will join in today. So take advantage of the coupon code. If you use my affiliate link, I'll get a little credit for that, which is greatly appreciated. So what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to run you through sort of the packaged items that they gave me to show you some of the new features, and and I'll just talk over it while it's playing. But give me 1 second. Excuse me. See if I can get over to the screen, and I'll just put myself down here in the corner. So here, what they're going to demonstrate is basically the new AI masking tools. So these are the key things: AI masking, um, and they have the most powerful computers, you know, at their main office where they do all of the engineering for the AI, and it has various subject to text, but this AI is unlike anything I've seen in being able to select and pick things out. And the workflow for picking things out is really amazing, and I'll demonstrate that on some of my own images. But let me just go ahead and just let this roll, and I'll just kind of talk in the background. But here they're just doing a gradient pull of the background, then they're selecting the subjects here, which are all the kids in the front, and then they're blurring the background to sort of give you this sort of shallower depth of field of this image. And it's very, very easy to do, and I'll demonstrate that. Here in this next image, they're also doing another sort of AI selection where they're going to brighten the background a little bit, but not brighten the subject, which is this lady here in the front. And so what they've done here is they've brightened the background without brightening the subject itself, because they were able to isolate the subject very, very easily. And it's really as easy as it looks, as they're demonstrating here. Okay, and in this next slide here, what they're doing is using the AI selection to just select certain parts of the clothing and change the color using the color wheel. And DxO has probably the very best color management out there. They have their own DxO wide color gamut that they developed in-house to give you the most control and flexibility and realistic reproduction and editing of colors in your photos. And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but it's really an amazing feature of DxO when you're editing your photos and being able to edit color. So here they're just selecting the hat very easily and then changing the color here to a blue and reducing the saturation so it matches the sweater. Now they're just going to change the background color very easily. And this is why I tell my students to always just get a gray backdrop. It's so easy to change the background color in post processing like they did here. So if we go back, let me just show you that color wheel. This the color management or color editing in this is among the best, and it gives you the most smoothest gradients and tones when you're adjusting color. The next slide here is just another quick demo of quick selecting a subject and changing the exposure. And this is a very common technique in portrait photography where you just want to make the subject a little bit brighter than the background in a lot of times. And in this scenario here, we're doing exactly that, but the subject was actually a little bit underexposed here, as you can see from the original image. So just brightening the main subject a little bit. And what I like about this, if we go back to this part here, you'll notice that the masking is not a hard mask. It actually feathers just a tiny bit around the subject in a very intelligent way. I mean, nothing's perfect, but this is about as perfect as you can get to selecting all the little fine strands of hair, and then just mildly feathering around the edges here, especially down here in the shirt, to give a very, very natural uh, selection. So when you're brightening the image, it's very, very natural, and it doesn't look like, it's just been cut out, right? You want the final edit to look as natural as possible, but just enhance it a little bit. Um, and that's exactly what they've done here and demonstrated using the tool. So like it's very lightly feathered down in here. It's just beautiful how the AI works. And then here they're just giving sort of a demonstration of the optical module and the DxO Deep Prime. This has been done to death, with all the other affiliates out there, but I just wanted to share it because it is part of the package that they provided. Um, but yeah, DxO does an amazing job, and I'll demonstrate this on some of my own pictures as well. And then finally here, it's just again subject to text. They're going to select animals this time, and you'll see that it selected both animals at the same time. And what they're doing here now is selecting the reflection of the animal because that wasn't automatically selected. But the AI is very, very quick and snappy, and it just selects, all the animals or all the people, or if it detects a subject, it'll just pick that subject, whatever it is. It's pretty amazing. The AI programming that they did here is just, it's so powerful. And the beautiful thing about it is it's all done on your computer. You don't need to be online and send your images, or the images don't get uploaded to an AI model on, some server that the company owns to do the processing. All the processing is done right on your own computer. So if that's a concern, and I know a lot of people were concerned about this, with Adobe, I think it was, where they were worried about their images being used to train future AI models and/or any privacy concerns that they might have. That's just a non-issue here with DxO. And this is a further demonstration of just how quickly it selects the subject. And again, you'll see here what they did is they brightened the main subject very quickly using the AI tool and exposure. And then they're going to select. Now, what's interesting here is it says select people, and when you do that, it actually selects the person's hand. So that I didn't expect. So if there's any human part in the image, it should be able to select that part out separate from other parts. And then what I would do here is I would probably just lower the luminance on the hand a little bit while maintaining the brightness of the bird at the same time. So I think that was the last one. Let me see if there's one more. Oh, there's one more here. This is a new batch renaming tool. This is something that I used to use a third-party software called Faststone to do for my client work. Just like this is a client. I assume if you're a wedding photographer, this would be for your client. I do this a lot with my architectural photography in third-party software because this wasn't available, inside of Photolab. So now I can do this directly, but there's some nuances here that I want to show you that really help me as a photographer by simply renaming the files. And it's not about data asset management. It's about, analyzing your photos later when you want to look at them and see the output and try, because as a photographer, you like to experiment and try different settings, uh, and compare, one pair of settings to another pair of settings. And the renaming file is really, really powerful to help you do that very easily. And I'll show you that because you have the ability to not add just like time and date and names and change the file name. You can also add EXIF data directly into the file name, which is very, very powerful to help you improve your photography when you're doing comparisons and trying different settings and experimenting in your photography. Being able to see the EXIF data right in the file name really makes a big difference. You don't have to like try and pull up the EXIF data separately or have it in a separate panel somewhere. It's just right there in the file name, and it makes it very easy. um, and then let's see. So yeah, I replayed this one, but I'll demo this in a way that I would use it personally for my photography and improving my photography. And then one last one here is just the various tools that are available to you to help manage your workflow. And I'll talk a little bit about how I use these, but you can, of course, color label uh, the photos like they've done here. They have blue and purple, and then some that haven't been color labeled. There's a green one. There's also a star rating system, and then there's also a pick and unpick. And there's, you know, lots of ways to categorize your images. And typically, I categorize my images for that particular shoot. I don't try to have consistency from one shoot to the next or one day to the next. Um, I typically, because I'm doing a lot of different things. Sometimes I'm doing focus bracketing and I want to use these color labels and star systems ratings differently. Other times, I'm just doing a normal photo walk and I want to categorize certain images differently than other. So I might color label my high res shot modes in red, and then I'm going to put a star next to, say, the final in camera focus stacked image. And another day, I might just group color a stack of images. If I didn't do in camera stacking, then I'll just color label a stack of images. And there's another new great feature in Photolab that you can stack images by shot time. And that's very, very powerful, especially if you like to do focus bracketing and panoramas. And I'll demonstrate that. Uh, so yeah, they're just kind of going through how you color label and add star systems, and you can put things into projects. You can have favorite folders, just all kinds of things. So uh, and the thing about Photolab is they don't have a way to import your photos directly. So I'll talk about some of the pros and cons of Photolab just very briefly. And I think the pros far outweigh any of the cons. Um, but, you know, this can be a pro or a con depending on how you look at it. I look at it as a pro. But like I said, there's no way to directly import your photos. What you're doing is you have to import your photos using either your Explorer or File Finder, whatever it is in Apple. I don't know what they call it. You can directly import the images from your SD card on your camera, onto your computer into a folder, and you need to have a fairly methodical way of importing your images to begin with. So I like to just do by year, quarter, day. And then for each day, I will relabel that folder to whatever the subject is or location. And I'll show you how I structure mine. And then, so the big pro to that is there's virtually no overhead on the computer and in the software to open up your files and look at things. And if you delete images off your hard drive, when you go back into Photolab, you don't have to like recatalog or synchronize your folders like you would have to do in Lightroom. Everything is just handled, it's just basically a file explorer in Photolab. So let me show you, let's go back to the Photolab. And so I basically have a couple of different ways of organizing my photos. So I have my D drive here, it's my primary drive. And I have this organized as I have a media folder, and then I have my chronological year 2025. I have a separate folder for my clients, and then I have sort of a miscellaneous or other folder for other things that really are not for uh, editing my own images. These are images that folders where I might be experimenting with things and I'm just going to delete the images later. These are really non-important miscellaneous type things. And then I have a projects folder. Again, this projects folder is typically what I use for, uh, if I'm working with a new camera or if I'm working with some product I have to review or filters or I'm experimenting with flat lay photography. And I just create these folders in this project folder. These are just experimental images. Again, not that important. And I'll archive them later or just delete them altogether. And then I have my video folder. So I have generic videos in this folder, and then my YouTube video folders in this one labeled from 501 and up. But if we go back into my 2025 folder, you can see I have them broken up into first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and then we can go into the third quarter. And then here I have them broken down by day. And then each day I try to label the location or subject, right? So in this case, this is the pictures of my dog Ellie using a CCTV lens. This is using my OM3 at Meadowlark. This is using the Pentax camera at Meadowlark. So I like to break things up typically, but it's still in a chronological order in that sense. And then you also have the addition to, you can get lost in your folder structure sometimes when you have, decades or years of images. So a lot of times you can also create a favorites folder. So if I want to quickly jump to 2025, I don't have to go into my PC, then select the D drive, then select the media folder, then select the year folder. I can just quickly click here and go right into it directly this way. Or if I want to go into my clients folder, I can just click on here, open that up, and then I have my client folder here. Or if I want to go quickly into my projects folder. So these are just my favorite folders. And then I have a live stream folder where I do weekly edits of photo editing. So just to give you a kind of a feel for how I organize my photos on my hard drive to find things very quickly, and then how I use Photolab to help me organize that on top by the favorites folder. You also have a projects folder down here. This folder is independent of your file structure on your hard drive. So this is what I use again for very specific projects. For example, I have my ISO folder here where I drop in, high ISO images by ISO number, so 100, 200, 400, and up. And this helps me organize things again when I'm testing different ISOs and different cameras. And I want to do some comparisons and try to optimize the settings in my camera for each camera individually. That's what I usually do this for. And a lot of times, I can group things by genre. I haven't really got into this yet, but I want to group all my architectural pictures and all my birds and wildlife, my landscape, still life, street photos. I can create these additional folders very easily, or projects. And then here I have my film folder where I can separate it by film type, HP5, Kodak Tri-X 400. And like I said, what's nice about the projects folder is it doesn't matter where they are on a single hard drive or if they're spread across multiple hard drives, you can bring them all into your projects here or create projects or folders so that you can access them quickly without trying to remember, gosh, which hard drive was that on? Which, folder was that in? I can just go right to, I took a picture of my dad 5 years ago. Uh, you know, I can just go right to my project folders over here and get to it very quickly. So for example, like today I created this DxO9 project where I'm going to demonstrate some of the features that I really like about Photolab 9 and how I use them. Okay, so I'll leave that there. And let's see, so we did favorite projects. Okay, so let's talk about file renaming and um, stacking, okay? Not focus stacking, but stacking images together. So for example, let me go into this folder here. So I'm just gonna right click on it, then let's see, load original image folder. Oh, this is the one I want. So what I'm gonna do, let me just unstack all of these real quick. So I want to demonstrate the stacking feature. So basically what I did, I took these this morning and let me go ahead and continue to unstack these. Remove stack. All right. So I have 874 images because I was doing a lot of focus bracketing. And it's a combination of RAW and JPEG. And I typically do in-camera stacking where it takes 15 images and then creates one additional image, which is the in-camera stacked image, which would be a JPEG. And if I'm shooting RAW plus JPEG, if I do a 15 image stack, then I will get 30 images plus one more, which is the final stacked image in camera. And having 874 images, it's going to be tough to kind of go through these and figure out where one set of images start and another group of stacked images or focus bracketed images start next, so from start to end, start to end. So using the stacking feature using the file stacking feature or image stacking feature in Photolab allows me to group the photos together very easily without having to try and figure out where one group of stacked images start and then the next one starts. So all I have to do is just go here and I'm going to select all 849 images like this. And then I'm going to do filter. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm going to right click on any of the images like this. And I'm going to go up here to stacking. And then I'm going to go all the way down here to stack by shot date. So right now it's saying I have 84 images, 84 stacks with 20 unstacked. But typically when you're doing focus bracketing, it takes about 15 seconds to 30 seconds to focus bracket and stack those images together in camera. So I'm going to just put a 30-second interval here. So I'm going to slide this over until I get to about 32 seconds. So you can see I have 29 stacks and 3 unstacked images. And I'll explain why it works that way. So let's just click on stack. And this might take about 30 seconds to do altogether. So we'll wait for that to go. But Oh, hopefully that while that's doing that, hopefully that makes sense, right? I'm taking images 15 at a time, which are focus bracketed, and then the final image will be an in-camera stacked image. Since I'm shooting RAW plus JPEG, I'm actually should get 30 images plus one more, which is the in-camera stack. And I'm doing that over and over again. In this case, it looks like I did it 29 times. But we'll see. We'll see how this stacks. So your workflow in the field, when you're doing focus bracketing and in-camera stacking, what I think about is, now that I have this feature available, I want to make sure that I don't try and group and stack or do in-camera focus bracketing too close together. I want to leave like a 30-second to 1 minute gap. So after I finish one set of in-camera focus bracketing, I'm going to wait 30 seconds to a minute, which is not a big deal. I normally do that anyway, before I start doing my next one, so that when I come back into Photolab, it's going to very easily stack all the images together for me by shot time. And in this case, I'm stacking by 30-second intervals. So it's still going. There's a lot of images to stack there. But let's see. Yeah, it's still going. But let me go to the chat section while that's doing, because it takes a couple of minutes to do that sometimes. And I'll see if there's any questions. So Scott asked, do I use DxO PureRaw? I do not, because PureRaw is a preprocessor. PureRaw basically has DxO D prime and optics module, and then a few options there to export, right? Uh, and that's primarily used to pre-process the image, do the noise reduction, optical corrections, maybe some sharpening before you take it into your photo editor. So a lot of Lightroom users like to use the PureRaw for the noise reduction and optical corrections that it can do, that it does better than Lightroom, in my opinion. Or you can use it for Affinity Photo or a lot of other programs like Luminar that don't have, very good noise reduction. And honestly, I don't think any of them compare to what DxO can do. So that's the purpose of PureRaw, is primarily for pre-processing the images before you take it into your favorite photo editor. Because especially Lightroom, a lot of people are kind of locked in. Lightroom's Achilles heel is the cataloging system, and people have decades of images that they've cataloged in Lightroom, and they're just not able to break away from that. But they want to take advantage of the uh, denoising and optical module in from DxO without having to get a full-fledged editor. So that's what PureRaw is for, and that's the reason I don't use it, because I primarily use DxO Photolab for all of my editing. So I do all my editing and denoising and optical corrections in Photolab, and I don't have to worry about pre-processing to use in Lightroom, for example. And is it possible to use plugins with this program? If yes, could you demonstrate? So I have seen third-party plugins, I think, but the short answer is not really. Okay. There may be some outliers out there. I can't think off the top of my head the plugins I saw for Photolab. But let's just say no, you cannot use plugins except for other DxO products like Nick Collection and Filmpack, possibly the ViewPoint. Those work directly with DxO Photolab. So I can go from editing a photo in Photolab and directly export that to Nick Collection within Photolab, work on it, and then it'll come back in, and I'll demonstrate that. I'll demonstrate Nick Collection, for example. And I can also show you Filmpack, because I have both of those, and they're integrated into Photolab. And then I guess this is not for me, but David says, considering using DxO, currently use Lightroom Classic, just wondering if you can completely replace it. So just as a general answer is yes, you can completely replace it. But like I said, the Achilles heel of Lightroom is that cataloging feature. Uh, so if you have a pretty elaborate catalog set up to find your photos, and a lot of people that archive their photos and relicense them out, over the last several decades, this is not uncommon, right? But even enthusiasts, you have your catalog set up in a way that you can find, say, a picture of an eagle that you took 5 years ago very quickly because you cataloged it in a way that you can find it either through keywords, projects, all the options that Lightroom has for data asset management. So if you can give that up, if you can give up the cataloging system and the data asset management that Lightroom has, yes, you can completely replace uh, DxO. But this leads me to a couple of the disadvantages that DxO has, right? I talked about the folder system, right? You can't import directly using Photolab. For me, that's a pro because there's no overhead, because you know how Lightroom can take a long time to index a folder sometimes. Um, and get corrupted, whatever. Lightroom's fairly reliable, the cataloging system. They did a good job, but it is a lot of overhead on the system. But a couple of the things that Lightroom can do that Photolab cannot on its own is things like in-camera photo focus. Give me a second. HDR, right? In Lightroom, it's very easy to just select 3 to 5 images and have it create an HDR. Lightroom can also do panoramas right off. You just select 5 or 6 images, and It'll do a panorama. So there's 2 examples. And Lightroom is, if you have the photographer's package or license like I do, you also get Photoshop with that. And Photoshop does a ton of things that Lightroom cannot. Specifically, it does layering of images. That's why I still use Photoshop and Lightroom to some degree, but mostly I use Photoshop because of the layering abilities and the work that I have to do with layering for my paid work. Uh, you cannot stack different images on top of each other in Photolab. So that's a key advantage that Photoshop has. Now, that said, you can supplement, and a lot of people, even though they own Photoshop and Lightroom, they still supplement those programs with third-party software like Helicon Focus to do focus bracketing. It is way better than Photoshop at doing difficult focus bracketing type shots where you want to stack the images together. You get a lot less holes and more features, and it's just a lot easier and does a better job. So a lot of people, even though they own Photoshop and Photoshop can do stacking, they still buy Helicon Focus or Zareen, which is one I'm considering. HDR. Photoshop and Lightroom do a decent job at HDR, but Nik Collection has probably the best HDR software or capability. And a lot of users, even though they have Photoshop and Lightroom, still buy Nik Collection because Nik Collection has a bunch of stuff, hence the name collection. Now for panoramas, again, Photoshop does an exceptional job, but there's still better software yet over Photoshop's panorama software. And there's a free one that I use called Color Pano or Pano Color. I think it's Color Pano. It's free and it's very, very powerful, and it's faster, and it does a better job than Photoshop for straight up panoramas. So again, a lot of times, even though people own Photoshop, Lightroom, they still buy these third-party softwares to supplement them, and that's what you would have to do with, in this case, Photolab. And that's what I've done. I've supplemented my panorama or lack thereof ability in Photolab with Kolar Pano. I've substituted the HDR feature with Nick Collection, albeit at an additional cost. And the focus stacking, right? I supplement it with, right now I'm using something called Zareen, but a more commonly known one is called Helicon. So I'm supplementing Photolab with these software. But if you want an all-in-one, you know, that's sort of a jack of all trades, yeah, Lightroom Photoshop will do that all in one. But, some people don't like the monthly or annual like licensing fee. Once you buy Photolab, you basically own the license lifetime. And in addition to that, they will update the software. Specifically, they're going to fix bugs and things, right? But they're also going to update the optics module, right? So, and the optics module means it's going to support more cameras and lenses to give you that excellent quality of output that DxO is kind of known for. So for example, they just added the Fujifilm X-H2. I'm sorry, the Fujifilm GFX 100, the OM System OM5 Mark II. They've added these cameras along with the appropriate lenses to their optics module database, so you get the absolute best image quality from a particular lens and camera combination. So that's kind of an overview of the pros and cons. Uh, and the cons are not that bad because I feel like anybody that's serious about doing panoramas and stacking and HDR, they're going to supplement Photoshop and Lightroom with a third party software anyway. Some free, some paid. Um, but if what happens when you buy like a lifetime license, say for Photolab 9, they're going to update the optics module and fix bugs for the next 2 years. That said, uh, let's say Deep Prime XD5 comes out, right? Like right now we're on 4 or 3. We're on Deep Prime 3. Let's say 4 or 5 comes out later. If you currently have 3, they're not going to update you to 4 or 5. You're going to have to upgrade the entire program. You're not going to get like a software update for Photolab 9. You're going to have to buy Photolab 10 or upgrade to Photolab 10. You get a discounted price. It's basically half the price of the full version. The upgrade version is about half the price. So keep that in mind. If you are uh, happy with your current version of Photolab, because a lot of people are still happy with Photolab 7 and Photolab 8, and these new AI features are not going to really help them with their, you know, it's not going to solve any problems in their photography and photo editing. There's no reason to update to Photolab 9. Photolab 9 is adding some really nice workflow and AI enhancements for subject selection. But if you don't need those things, you're still getting excellent results, I'd say, from Photolab 6 to Photolab 7, Photolab 8. I really like Photolab 8 uh, because of the workflow improvements they made with the ViewPoint technology. Photolab 6 and 7 was a little bit awkward, but Photolab 8 fixed a lot of the problems, or a lot of the awkwardness that we had in Photolab 6. So I'd say if you're on Photolab 6, uh, you definitely want to upgrade to Photolab 9 at this point, because you're going to get a lot of improvements in workflow, not just the AI and other stuff. There's a lot of other workflow things that they improved. And if you're on Photolab 7 or 8, I'd say it's really about the AI subject detection and the additional workflow things that they're adding in Photolab 9. Uh, I think it's like $100 to upgrade or whatever that price is. It's half the full price. That's going to be up to you to decide if that's going to be worth it. I think it is for the kind of photography I do. It really gives me a lot of flexibility and speeds up the workflow. particularly with the now stacking feature and file renaming. But anyhow, sorry, that's such a long answer. I didn't want to dwell on that too much. I wanted to do mostly demonstrations today. Um, yeah, you're in both worlds like me, right? DxO and Lightroom. And Roger's here. Good to see you. Do you move images chronologically from the chronological folders to project folders if they belong to a project? Yes, I move them. I don't make copies. So very, very common with client work. I might import them into like my regular chronological folder, but I'll move them to a client folder if I do that by mistake. I try to import it to the correct folder to begin with, but if I find later there's a problem, I can just simply move it, and I can use my file explorer to do that. And I don't have to worry about the cataloging in DxO. Now DxO Photolab does index folders for creating previews, not too dissimilar from Lightroom, but nothing gets broken really when you move things. You just have to re-index the folder, and it's fine. Uh, and then the virtual project folders at the bottom seem to only work if the correct media hard drive is actually connected. Yes. Yeah, I mean, if the original folder, the original file has to be accessible by your computer, and then the project folder basically points to that location. It doesn't actually make a copy and import it into a new location. So it saves hard drive space for one, but it also is not dependent on where that file is. So it's kind of a how that works, and that's the way it should work, in my opinion. Is the projects folder should be independent of where the file is on the system. But if that file is not connected to your computer, it's not going to be in the projects folder anymore. It looks like the key difference between Photolab and Lightroom is Photolab does not manage files where Lightroom does. DxO is done manually, but Photolab organizes projects like, yes. So the projects folder is very similar to, I think Lightroom has a projects folder. It's very similar in that sense. And let's see. Okay. Lundborg makes a good point here. Because of the very powerful AI that they've added to Photolab 9, and the fact that it runs on your computer and doesn't go off to the cloud, you're going to need a pretty powerful computer. So what does that mean? The key thing is you need to have a dedicated graphics card like an RTX, NVIDIA RTX, okay? It could be the RTX 2060, 3060, 4060, you know, 5060. They're up to the 5 series now. I use I have an RTX 4080 in my laptop, and it's a high power 4080, so it's not a low voltage one. I'm kind of getting into the weeds here, but uh, the CPU is not quite as important. I would, if you have a Core i5, Core i7, excuse me, Intel processor, and an RTX, and 16 to 32 gig of RAM, you should be fine. The more powerful the computer, the snappier everything's going to be. But I would, and they do state the minimum requirements on their website. But I can tell you from my experience, and I can only speak to Photolab 8 at this point, because Photolab 8 used the denoising, which is a very powerful AI program built in for denoising. Uh, I had a friend with a very modest computer laptop with an RTX 4060 and a Core i7 processor, low energy processor, because the processor is not quite as important. It was about a $1,400 laptop, just to give you some perspective. And that was able to handle and performed nearly as well as my, you know, $2,500 laptop, which has much higher specs. It performed nearly as well because most of the work is done by the graphics card and not the processor. But ultimately, yeah, the more powerful computer you have, the snappier Photolab's going to be. Photolab is a standalone program. Other things like PureRaw, Nick Collection, uh, Filmpack, these are all sort of plugins for Lightroom and Photolab, but Photolab itself is standalone. And another difference between Photolab and Lightroom is that Photolab doesn't recognize some of my camera models, and that is true. I have the same issue. For example, my Pentax monochrome camera is not supported right now. You can actually submit a request to DxO to support your camera. God only knows if they'll do it, but it's pretty robust. And they do have a camera lens finder on their website. So if you're curious about your specific camera, if it's supported or not, then you can go to the website. You can look for your camera. It's some kind of drop down menu thing. That said, for cameras that are not directly supported, for example, if it's not able to open up the raw file, you can kind of get around that by using the free Adobe DNG converter. So if you Google Adobe DNG converter, it's free. You can convert your images to DNG using that. It has to be Adobe because Photolab recognizes Adobe DNG. So if you use the Adobe DNG converter, you'll be able to open those files. So you get through one hurdle, right? You can open up the images in Photolab, and then you'll be able to use the AI tools. However, two things that will not work with a imported DNG file this way is denoising, the AI denoising like D prime, D prime XD. So you're gonna have to resort to their standard denoising algorithm, which is not bad, but it's not anywhere near as good as the D prime, but it works. And the optics module, right? The optics module, which corrects for some distortion, vignetting, and sharpens the image, is not going to be available either. And again, you can work around that by fixing the distortion yourself. And there's a slider in Photolab for distortion, like barrel and pin cushion. And there's also vignetting sliders to correct for vignetting. So you can get around it in the rare case that your camera is not supported. You can get around it if Photolab is your only software. You can get around it that way. But it's probably best not to buy Photolab if the camera that you use the most is not supported, because then you're not able to take advantage of the Deep Prime XD and the optics module, which are signature items of Photolab. So go to their Photolab website, DxO website, and make sure your camera is supported. The lens, they're expanding their lens support to third-party stuff like Viltrox and Samyang. They continue to expand all of that, but it takes them a little time, right? But it's very robust already. Just about every major camera, recent camera and lens is supported. I haven't really had any problems with support for most of the cameras that I've had. I've had one or two exceptions. The monochrome camera that I have comes to mind. Okay, so that's that's all of the questions. So the stacking finished. So let's go back to this where I wanted to talk about the stacking. So you can see, hopefully you can see this, but there's a box here, number 31. Let me see if I can make the screen a little bit larger. Uh, I'm going to change my display settings so that the fonts are easier to see. That should be a little bit easier right here. So right now you can see that I have 32 uh, 32 images here which includes stacks. They count the stack as one. So this first shot here is all by itself because I was doing a test shot to check for exposure of my flash because I was using flash with my focus bracketing. And then I took a couple of more. I adjusted the flash power, and now I got the flash setting where I wanted it to. So then I performed a focus bracketing with in-camera stacking. And I did 15 shots. So I'm doing RAW plus JPEG. So it's going to be actually 30 shots plus one image stacked in camera. So that's why I have the number 31 here. So if I expand this, I just click on the 31, and now it's expanding out, and I can see all the JPEG and RAW images. And the very last image here with the star, and I put this star, I did that star in camera. This last image should be the final stacked image. So I'll click on that, and if we look, this is the stacked image. If I look at the previous image, that's one of the images in the stack, and this is the in-camera stacked image. So let me collapse that again, but you can see, so I can quickly see I have 31, 31, 31. Here I have 30. So what that tells me is that the camera failed to stack it in camera. So what I'm going to have to do is use something like Helicon Focus or Zareen to stack these separately with a third-party software because the camera wasn't able to stack it. Usually it's because the spider moved or whatever I'm taking a picture of moved, and then all of a sudden the camera can't make that alignment, and that's why it failed the stacking. But I can very quickly see which ones stacked in camera and which ones did not. So 31, 31, here's one with 61. So I did two in a row very quickly here. Another 31, a 30. I can go very quickly down and I can see here's 24, here's 4. So there's some issues here. I think what I was doing in this scenario was I was testing my flash power and adjusting flash power. So that's why the stacks are a little bit less, or maybe there was some other issue. But I know that these images are probably not ones that I'm going to use for any kind of stacking. These are just images that I was doing test shots to adjust my exposure or composition. And then I can see that this group here, I have some banding, so I had to adjust my shutter speed. And then once I got my shutter speed adjusted, I can see I have a successful stack here of 31. So this is what's lovely is I took a picture of like one spider, one fly. There's two groups here of a fly. And then a couple of different flowers, this red rose, or whatever this is. I think it's a rose. So uh, this is so much easier at looking at 32 different stacks than it is to look at 874 images. So this is a very, very powerful tool for people that like to do panoramas, because panoramas are the same thing, right? You got a group of images together to create one pano, and for focus bracketing and stacking. So I love this feature. So this leads me to the next thing is the file renaming. So what I can do is, let's say this stack here, I'm going to expand it. This stack here was successful. Because I can go look at the last image down here, zoom in, and I can say, okay, this was a successful stack. So I put a star. I'm also going to put a pick here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these images and rename them to jumping spider. But I'm going to put the EXIF data in the file name as well. So let's do, hopefully I remember this correctly. Is it in here? Rename selected images right here. So what I can do is I can use a preset that they have. but I don't want to use a preset. What I want to do is just type in jumping spider, and then I can use a sequence number in various formats, or what I like to do is actually include EXIF data. And then all I have to do is say, okay, I want to put in the aperture that I used and the shutter speed. So that is, where is that? Focal, oh, here, shutter speed. And then I'm going to add the camera model last. And then I'm going to add the sequence number. So let me go back here to counter. And I'm going to put a sequence number here. And I'll just put a dash in between these, because otherwise they'll be scrunched together. Now, if I look down here, it's probably very hard to read, but it's going to give me a preview of what my file rename looks like. So I can see I'm going to have jumping spider, aperture is f9, shutter speed is 1/100th of a second. I shot with the OM1, and this is the first image of the sequence that I'm renaming. So then I just click here, rename 31 images. And then hopefully this doesn't take too long. And we're good. So let's see, it renamed the JPEG images, but it did not rename. The source file could not be found. That's interesting. Where did my raw images go? But you'll see, let me just show you the JPEGs. I'm gonna have to figure that out. But you can see if I select my JPEG images, there's 31 of them here. It renamed everything all the way out. Jumping spider, F9, 1/100th of a second, OM1, shot number 2. Over here is shot number 30. And then here's number 31. And then I would do the same thing for my rose images. I would just rename them, red rose, and then I might put aperture number, camera model, shutter speed, and sequence number, something like that. All right. So that's the file renaming and the stacking feature. It's really amazing for focus bracketing and panoramas. This is going to be, for me, I hate to use the word game changer, but this is going to make a big difference in my workflow and how I manage my files on my computer. Okay, let's see. And then David says, you mentioned DxO is expanding their support for lenses. Is that for new lenses or only does include older ones like the E500? I have thousands of photos taken with the E500. Yeah, I don't know. I think if enough people put in a request to support the E500 and lenses, they'll do it. If you and I are the only two that ask for it, it'll probably go at the bottom of the list. Because usually what they do first are the cameras that get just released, like the GF100 from Fujifilm or the OM5 Mark II. Those seem to have gotten added very quickly within 4 to 6 weeks. Something like an E500, what are we? We're up to Photolab version 9 at this point, so 9 years, and they haven't added it yet. I would venture to say they probably never will, unfortunately, at this point. I'm just being realistic. Okay, and then I know you mentioned submitting a request for support, but I wonder how likely they are. Yeah, so like I said, it's at this point on version 9, if they still don't have the E500 in there, it's very unlikely at this point. So you'll have to try the Adobe DNG conversion software that I talked about, which is free. And then at least you'll get all of the tool except for denoising and optics module. Yeah, the file renaming is pretty amazing. I'm not sure about this little glitch with it. I don't know what happened to my raw images because it's saying it can't find them. But yeah, the file renaming is amazing. I agree. Maybe I missed it, but can you intersect mass in Photolab 9? For example, select sky, then intersect with a linear gray. Yes, you can. So I've been practicing that a little bit. Like I said, I just started using it yesterday. Uh, they sent me a copy, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. And of course, Johnny come lately, Mr. Procrastinator waited to the day of the release to start to actually use it. So I was like, how hard can it be? It's not that hard actually, but I'll show you. So let me just get a sip of water and then we'll move on to uh so I think I covered all of the basic file stuff. So let's go into the AI masking, the denoising, and local adjustments with the ViewPoint technology. These are the key things that really are huge for Photolab 9. I mean, I'm just happy as all for just the uh, file renaming and stacking. That's huge for me personally. Um, I don't know if I would have paid $100 and some dollars to upgrade or not just for that, but I'm really glad it's here now. But definitely, if you're on a Photolab 8, the AI stuff that they added, the masking stuff is amazing. So I just need about 5 seconds here. Okay. Uh, and just a reminder again, down below is my affiliate link for Photolab 9 and all DxO products like Nick Collection. I'll demo a little Nick Collection here today as a plugin because someone had asked about that before, as well as a 20% discount code. Seriously, you can get Photolab 9 for about 180 some dollars. What I don't know what the pricing is where you are or whatever website. It should be the same around the world, right? But I guess what I'm saying is depending on your currency. I don't know what your currency is. But here in the US, I think I'm seeing it for about 180 some dollars with the discount versus say $240 without the discount. So it's a huge amount. 40 or 50 bucks, somewhere in that range. And you won't see a better discount until Black Friday. But because this is being released now, Black Friday may not be that much either for Photolab 9. They seem to have kind of leveled out. The best discount I ever seen was uh, about 4 years ago. They were doing 50% off, maybe because of COVID or whatever. But uh, right now, the best I ever seen was like 30% off on Black Friday. I wouldn't wait, 2 months for Black Friday just to save another 10%. I would just get it now with the 20% off. Uh, because now that it's released and it's 20% off and it's brand new, 20% is probably all we're going to get. I'm just guessing. If I'm wrong and they do 50% off on Black Friday, okay, I'm going to have my foot in my mouth, but I seriously doubt it. All right. So let's get to some editing here. So I'm going to go to the projects folder and go down here to Photolab 9. And let me reset my filters here. So let's just do quickly a high ISO one because I want to demonstrate the power of the denoising that Photolab has, which is renowned for. But here I have an image at 64,000 ISO on my, what is this? This is my OM1. But this is when I had the big white whale lens here, the 150 to 400. It was on loan. So what I'm going to do, this is straight out of camera right now, and you can see there's a ton of noise. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to apply a basic preset that I created, but it's very similar to the default preset that DxO has. So what I'm doing is I'm applying noise reduction and optical corrections uh, to this image, along with some chromatic aberration, just some very minor tweaks. I'm going to give away my presets for free. Once I get my head together this weekend, I'll try and figure out a way to give these away free. But this is my basic preset. And then what I'm going to do, and you're not seeing at this point the actual noise reduction. You're just seeing sort of a mini preview. But if I use the loop tool here, I can zoom in on a specific area and I can see the noise reduction being applied here. So you can see how much detail it pulled out, even with a micro four thirds ISO 64,000 image, how much detail it pulled out. It didn't pull out detail everywhere. Like the top of the bird's head here, where the feather details are very, very fine, yeah, it's gone. You're not going to pull detail out of data that's not there. So if I pull in, let me see if I can go up to the bird's head. The feathers get very, very fine on the bird's head here. There's probably some depth of field issues here as well. But yeah, the detail there is gone. And yet, if you compare it to before, there was nothing there before. But at least I was able to pull out a ton of detail otherwise. So that's that. So I'm going to go ahead and export this with really, well, let's do some AI stuff. So I'm going to click on the AI button here under the local adjustments panel. And I can just hover my mouse over different areas and it'll automatically select things. Or I can use the drop-down menu and say, select the animals. And that'll be, that's one way to do it. And then I'll go ahead and rename the mask here, bird, like that. And then I can do select background. Well, hold on. Let me get a new mask. So I'm going to start a new mask by clicking the plus sign. And then I'm going to do select background. Like so. Now I have the mask color overlay set to blue. The default setting is actually red. But a lot of my images have red in them, like this flower over here, this bird feeder, this towel or whatever that is, red gloves. So I changed it to blue just so it's easier to see. Um, now, if you're masking blue sky, you probably don't want to use a blue mask. But anyhow, that's that. And you can see how it's kind of feathered in into the bird's feet and talons here. So what I might do is use a brush here and hit the Alt key and just kind of subtract that out a little bit like that. Not too much, just a little, just like that. In the background, typically I like to be just a little bit darker. So I'm just going to bring the dark brightness down a tiny bit, like so. And what I might also do is just shift the white balance a little bit warmer, just so it doesn't look so cool. And that's that, just a little bit, just very, very subtle. And I'm going to increase the vibrancy as well, because there are some colors back there, but they got a little bit lost because of the high ISO. So I'm going to increase the color vibrancy there just a little bit. I'm going to go up and let's work on the bird now. So this mask, I don't have to rename it, but I'll put in background here. So let's go back to the bird. And I'm going to brighten the bird up a little bit. Just a hair. I'm going to use the loop tool and just kind of get a close up because Maybe I want to get just a little bit finer detail on the feathers here. So I can go down here. Let's see, probably all the way down here at the bottom. I can say increase the fine details. I'll just crank that up to 100. Okay, that's a little bit too crispy. So I'll just back it off a little bit. And then maybe pull the noise reduction off a little bit as well. So I can selectively reduce the amount of noise reduction and hopefully be able to pull in just a tiny bit more detail. So we were at 40, I'm gonna drop it back to 20 and leave it at that. And I think that's it. So let me go ahead and export this. And I'm gonna export as a JPEG. I have the advanced, you can rename individual files the same way. So you can just add a suffix, like I might just add a suffix DxO9, or I can rename this advanced. And let me edit this. So I'm going to change this to, let me get rid of file name. So I'm going to do camera model, ISO. I don't care about aperture and shutter speed. So when I'm doing bird photos, typically it's ISO and shutter speed is all I care about. And then I'll add a sequence number like this. I'll just drag it up there. And maybe in the front, I'll put the file name. Just up there. So between ISO and shutter speed, I'm going to put a dash. I'm looking down here at the preview, and sequence number, I'll put a dash. Okay, and we'll save that or export it. And then Hiker Dude, I'm going to do this next for the next image where I'm going to intersect the masking, okay? So let's look at the final output. So this usually takes about 15 seconds. I can click on the progress bar over here, and it'll show me, well, I got a lot of things going on. When I'm live streaming, a lot of times the computer's, distributing the CPU and uh, uh, graphics card, the GPU, between the live streaming and the photo editing. Okay, so this time it took 40 seconds. And let's reset this image and compare it to the output. And let me do it with a slider, a split view, and zoom in so you can really see this. So this is the edited image here on the left, and then the unedited. You can see what a huge difference this made. If I punch all the way in, you can see the feather detail. And it did a really good job. And again, this is an ISO 64,000 image. And let's just back off a little bit, just to a normal viewing. So I darkened the background, saturated the image a little bit, then denoised it. And I think we got a really, really good result there. As good as can be expected for a 64,000 ISO image. Okay, so let me see if I can address Hiker Dude's intersecting. So let's take this image here. This is an image where I did intersect things. So you'll notice that on this image, this is the straight out of camera. Over here is the edited image, and I was able to separate myself from the background. So let me demonstrate that real quick. So I'm going to reset this image. Well, let me just get a look at what I did again. Yeah, I had several masks here, background, skin, etc. So let me reset this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten my face and the foreground in general, which is me, the subject, and add a little more detail into the sky and color, and then do a perspective correction. So first I'm going to apply my basic preset, which again is optical corrections and denoising. And then I'm going to just look at the overall exposure. It's a little dark overall, but not that bad. So I think I'll leave it. And the composition is fine. Let's click on the AI local adjustment tool, and I can select the sky or parts of this building. And I'll expand on this, or I can select my face, or I can select my face and all my skin, or I can use the drop-down menu and select. If I do select subject, it's going to select my entire body. Or if I select people, same thing. But let's go ahead and I want to actually just do my face and my skin here. So I'm just going to, I can use the rectangle tool here and see what that does, like that. And then I can select, I'm going to use this tool, this pointer tool, and just select my arms. And there's a little bit of bleed here into the hat. If you look at the masking, you can see uh, it's going onto my hat a little bit, which is what I don't want. So I'm going to add another mask, or I'm going to subtract from that just using a brush. So I'm going to select the brush, hit the Alt key, and just take some of that off of my hat, like that. All right, that's good. And there's a little bit on my shirt here. I'll get rid of that. Let me crank up my flow. And get that off of my shirt. All right, very good. So now that I have everything selected, I'm going to rename this to just my skin, like that. What what am I, dyslexic? Skin. There we go. All right. And for this, I'm just going to push the shadows a bit, like that. I think that looks pretty good about right there. And then I noticed on my hat, some of the highlights are clipping just a little bit, not quite. So I'm going to create a new mask, and I'm going to use the AI pointer tool and just select my hat. And I'm just going to pull the highlights in a little bit, not that much. And I'll just rename this to hat. All right, now let's bring some detail into the sky. So let's create a new mask. And we can do just select sky like this. And for the sky, I'm just going to give it some clear view. Maybe push the highlights and contrast, just to make it a little more dynamic. A little bit of micro contrast. And I want to make the blue a little bit stronger. So I'm going to go down here to my color wheel, select the blue color. Maybe just spread that a little bit like this and increase the saturation on the blues. Like that. Okay, go over here and I'm going to click the smart lighting on a global scale. If I do it spot weighted, it'll detect the face and do a really intelligent brightening of the image. All right, let's do another image here. And this one I'll do very quickly. So I'm going to do a basic preset, and then I'm going to crop it to a wide, let's try 16 by 7. And then I'm going to adjust this like that. And then I'm going to get rid of this tripod. This is my camera, I think. So what I want to do is I want to silhouette the other photographer here, but not the foreground, and then also bring out some of the detail and color in the sky. So let's use the AI tool. And this is the first time I'm editing this picture. What if I do select people? Perfect. So I'm just going to silhouette the photographer like that. And then let's work on the sky. So I will select the sky just like that. And then I'm going to give it some clear view. Maybe pull the highlights just slightly. And then a little bit of micro contrast. And then let's saturate it or give it some vibrancy. I'm going to go up here. I might be able to pull the highlights in a little bit more like that. And I'm going to cool it off a tiny bit. It's just a little bit too warm, maybe just about 300 or 400 Kelvin. And then the foreground, let's create a new one, the sand. I'm going to just click there, and I'm going to click, let me use the square tool. I'm going to use the square tool to select the rocks like this and just add it. And I'm just going to push the shadows just a tiny bit. Maybe give it a little clear view and micro contrast. And then I'm just going to fix this little spot here of lens flare. Right there. And then I'm going to, let's see if I can remove this tripod. If not, I might have to crop in. All right, that's not bad. That one wasn't quite as good. Let me feather a little more and do repair like that. Get in there. All right, good. Uh, and I think that looks pretty good. Maybe I can do something with the water. Let's see if I can select the water using the AI tool. So let's start a new. Yeah, I can select the water just like that and just make it a little darker, maybe with some clear view and pull the exposure a bit. Perfect. Give it some micro contrast to give it a little ripple. And I think that looks pretty amazing. So I could export it so you can see all the noise reduction. But that's the original here on the left. It's very flat. uninspiring image to, I think this is a lot more interesting, has a lot more drama with the silhouetted photographer and then much more dramatic sky. And that wide format, I think, really works for this. Now there's some noise up in here. So if I export this, and I'll just use simple naming here, just a suffix of DxO9. Because I don't, in this image, I don't care about shutter speed and aperture and all of that. Maybe aperture, but for the most part, these images are pretty straightforward for me. So I don't need to experiment. I'm just going to set my aperture to f8 and put it on a tripod, and whatever the shutter speed is, it is, right? So that should export fairly quickly. Move this up. It's still working hard here. And then after this image, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments now. I'm just going to go back to the chat window after this exports, answer any remaining questions. And then if you want to see another demo of something in particular, I can do that. Oh, I was going to do Nick collection. So let me do a Nick collection thing real quick too. So let's see, let's compare to the output. So that's the original, and then that's the edited image. And you can see all of the noise cleaned up pretty well up here in the corners. That kind of came out. I don't know. I like this image personally. Okay. Let me do one more real quick because someone wanted to see sort of the plugins that you might use with Photolab. I have Nick Collection and Filmpack installed. So I'll just demonstrate the Nick Collection, but let me just do a quick edit on this picture. So basic preset, and then AI tools. So let's select the sky and give it some more drama with clear view, slight pull on the highlights, and a little micro contrast. And then let's select the building. Let's see. Seems like I'm not able to get the building all at once, so I'm just going to use a different tool here, just a rectangle tool, like that. Okay, good. Now I have the building selected, and I'm just going to brighten that up a bit. Let's click on the midtones and add some clear view and micro contrast. Make it a little brighter. Okay, good. That's about what I want. And then let's select the subject. So if I do subject, you can see it intelligently selected, just the person you're walking across the street. So I'm going to brighten them up. Just a little bit there, a little push in the shadows and the highlights. Maybe just a little brighter, right about there. And then I'm going to do a new mask. Let's select the street, see if it'll let me do that. Let me get back to the pointer. Yeah, the street. And then I'm just going to darken the street a little bit. That's good. Well, not that much. Maybe something like that. Just about about a quarter stop. And then I'm going to create a new mask, but this time I'm just going to use a control point because what I want to do is just sort of carry that brightness from the sun onto the street here. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to brighten that part of the street. And then I'm going to warm it up. So it looks like it's the sun illuminating that part. And then give it some micro contrast, because when there's light hitting something, it gets grittier, right? You get more contrast and you can see more details. So a little micro contrast there. Make it a little bit warmer. Maybe add some magenta in there as well. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's push the highlights a little bit extra. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. So let me export this, but let me take it into Nick Collection. So I'm just going to click on the Nick Collection plugin down here, and let's take it into HDR effects. Now, HDR effects can take in like 3 to 5 images, and you can blend them together with different exposures and blend them together to do what's typically known as an HDR, high dynamic range photo. But you can also take in a single image, like I'm doing here, and just use some of the presets that are in HDR, which I really like. So we'll give that just a moment. And while that's exporting, I'm going to just look at the chat section real quick. This is a great transformation of the silhouetted photographer against the sunset. Oh, thank you, Alan. And which 25 millimeter inexpensive lens do you recommend as a primary one? Define what you mean by inexpensive. The 25 millimeter f1.8 from Olympus or OM Systems, the version 1 is pretty cheap right now if you can find it on the used market in mint condition, like on eBay or MPB or KEH. You can get it for like 200 bucks. Another 25 millimeter lens that's autofocus is the Panasonic 1.7. I haven't had any issues with that. Some people say there's a slight back focus issue when you shoot at f4, but I've never seen it myself. But that lens you can get for like 100 bucks used, and I think it's on sale all the time for $200 or less, brand new. So look for that, the Panasonic f1.7. So those are two autofocus options. Not sure if there's any other third-party ones at this point, but those are the two I would look at for a cheap 25 millimeter lens, the Panasonic and the OM Systems, if you want autofocus. If you don't need autofocus, there's some third-party ones that are manual focus for less than $100. But if you're like if you can spend about 200, you might as well get autofocus. Okay, so now we're into the I'm sorry, Nick Collection. It exported it out with all the corrections that we made, but it's applying a preset here already. So I can go down here. Like I like this black and white preset here. I think this looks really good for this image. I may brighten it up just a tiny bit, but I think that's an amazing transformation with Nick Collection as a plugin. Um, we also have another one of my favorites is this one called SinStar. I like this one. So I might just increase the saturation a bit, just to get kind of a color version of what we just saw. Or this is more of a natural look. If you want a more natural sort of high dynamic range image, you can select that one. Yeah. But I think the one SinStar can just add some saturation in, and we'll save that. And then that'll take us back into Photolab. Oh, I'm in a project right now, so it's not going to show here. So I have to go back to the original folder. Give it a second. Oh, the poor computer is struggling here. But here's the output. So I'm going to reset the original image, set it as a reference. And we can compare it to, once things start loading, it's really bogging down here. Why is that sideways? There we go. So I think that's a pretty dramatic difference. So that's, the AI editing that I did plus the Nick collection. So I think that came out really nice. And if we just do a split view, I slide this over. I think that came out really cool. Some people hate this stuff. They hate HDR, like the surreal HDR that I do sometimes. I love it, but there you have it. Okay, so let me go to the chat section again, and it says, "Great overview, Rob. Been tempted over the years to add DxO Photolab 9. Might do it. Good edge separation on subject detection. Yes, really, really good edge detection. Uh, in some cases, it'll feather it just a tiny bit, which I don't mind. I like a little bit of feathering, uh, but you can subtract that out with a brush pretty easily. But for the most part, unless you're pixel peeping every single edge, you're not going to really see it, and it's going to intelligently select the subject with some minor feathering, if any. I would imagine like harder subjects, like a building. Let me pull up a building. Uh, like let's see how it does with this building. We should get a pretty hard edge. So if I apply basic preset and then select this building, and let's just push the exposure up a bit. And I'm going to zoom in. Give it a second. It's working. So yeah, uh, I think it did a good job. Now, when I hover my mouse over it, you're going to see the masking, but I think it did a good job here. This is a light. The top of the building is lit, so that's not a halo. That's natural. So it did a good job there. If I back it off again, and I'll just give it a little bit here, 10%. And if I make it really bright, so yeah, really good. Like for straight edges, it's very intelligent. What I noticed is that when there's straight, hard edges, it makes a very hard cut in the masking. But like when we're talking about clothes and hair and other things that are a little bit softer, it actually feathers a little bit in a very intelligent way. I haven't really had to subtract or worry about haloing effects like you might look for in a subject like that so far. But I've only been using this for 2 days now. So my initial impressions are very good right now with respect to your question about uh, good edge separation. It looks like it's doing an excellent job. But we will see over time because I do this every single week live, right? My live photo editing streams, and on top of my own photos that I edit for myself. Over time, I'm going to continue to use the AI tools, and then I'll get a much better feel, and I'll be able to answer your question much more definitively. But my first impression is it's doing an excellent job. And there's one Chinese. I'm not sure what you're referring to there. Any recommendations for a computer build for running DxO Photolab? Yeah. So very simple. Uh, if you're on a budget, RTX 5060, 5060, Core Intel i7, uh, the latest generation, either 13, 14, 15, even the new AI ones. I think they call them the Ultra 7s. But anyway, Intel i7 or better, 32 gig of RAM, and then an SSD drive. And you want to have at least 2 terabytes, because you're going to have a lot of photos. So the most important thing, RTX 5060 or 4060. The higher the number, the better. Like the like the 4080 is better than the 4060. The 5060 may not be better than the 4080. So the last two digits are kind of the secondary subset. The higher that number, the better. But if you get a 5060, like a 5060, a 5070, 5080, very good. Uh, Processor's not that critical. i7, i9. I wouldn't get an i5, okay, but I would get at least an i7. And then 32 gig of RAM. The latest, I don't know, they're DDR5, whatever you build, it's going to use the latest RAM anyway. Don't worry about latency and all of that stuff. Just get enough. 32 gig, I would recommend. And then an SSD. And then whatever that is, a laptop, a desktop. Typically, desktops, if you're talking about building one, you're talking about a desktop. You don't have to worry about looking at the power efficient versions like they put in laptops. So just get any of those and you'll be okay. I'm very tempted Byte software, but have to update my Mac OS. Ventura isn't cutting it. Just tried the demo. Yeah, I'm not familiar with Mac, but uh, yeah, because the AI is running on your computer and not uploading to a cloud. Uh, and even now my computer is stressing a little bit, but I'm like running two or three different things at the same time, right? I have my webcam software, my OBS software, my streaming software, Photolab, uh, and my browser all open at the same time. So it's really putting a strain on my computer. In Photolab 8, it wasn't as bad, but because of this AI stuff, I noticed it is really dragging. And let's see, my chat jumped all the way up. I have to go to the bottom and work my way back. Any recommendations for a monitor? Um, Depends on your budget. Monitors can get expensive, right? But I would say get a 32-inch monitor, okay? 27 minimum, but 32 is really nice. You want to make sure you get an IPS panel. I would get the high contrast IPS panels that have the 2000:1 contrast. So those are the things you want to look for, and has the color gamut. They'll normally state the sRGB color gamut is 100%, and that's fine for most things. But if you're going to buy a new monitor, you want to get at least an Adobe RGB color gamut 100%, and then the other one is the God, it escapes me now. There's another color gamut that's similar to Adobe RGB, but it's more for video. Um, I can't remember now. But for example, look at the Asus ProArt monitors. Those are the high-end monitors for photo and video editing, the Asus ProArt. And then once you kind of get the specs that the Asus ProArt has, like look at all the specs that it has, they'll tell you Adobe RGB, sRGB, brightness, contrast. They'll give you all those specs, right? Then compare that to other monitors you might be shopping for. That's where I would start. I would start with the Asus ProArt. They're a little bit pricey, but start with the Asus ProArt, then try and find an LG or a Dell monitor. Dell makes really good monitors. LG makes excellent monitors. Look at those to start when you start doing your comparison, because there's too many variables for me to kind of get into here in the stream. But start with the Asus ProArt, look at all the specs, and try and match that or do better than that with some other monitor. If you can do that, then I would buy the other monitor. If you cannot find something better than the ProArt, then just get the ProArt. Short answer is just buy an Asus ProArt, but you can do better. You can get a little better deal if you shop different brands and maybe even get better specs, but you certainly get a better price because Asus ProArts are a little bit pricey. No, not Rec 709. It's something else. Ah, oh my God. What the heck is it called? If I pull up my software, I'll know. I don't want to pull it up while I got everything else running though, because I don't want to crash. If I let me just look on Amazon real quick. Oh, here, DCI-P3. So this is pretty decent, right? 4K, you want to get 4K. I didn't mention that. 99% DCI-P3 is excellent. It's also USB-C. This HDR 400 doesn't matter. If it's HDR 1000 or something higher, but 400 is a pretty low standard. That's not really doesn't mean anything. You have to have a much higher number, like 1000. But expect the price to go up accordingly. Okay. But don't worry if the monitor claims to be HDR or not. It's not important in photography. In video work, if you're doing video, you should really talk to another person about monitor specs. But I can tell you that HDR 400 or HDR 1000 doesn't really matter much for photo editing. So look for these kind of specs, and then they also should give contrast. Yeah, it's an IPS panel, DCI-P3, 99% Adobe. Okay, HMG, very tempted. So I don't see any other questions here. We're running 2 hours at this point, so I guess as good a time as any to stop. Again, I have my affiliate links down below for you to download a 14-day trial, but don't wait because the discount expires this Friday. I hope to see you again. I'll probably be back on tomorrow, God willing. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the demo.